everyone, welcome back to D&J's Epic Quest. My name is Justin, and
This is Derek. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty okay. I talked to you last night, and I wasn't feeling real great then, but I am feeling much better than I did last night. So I
Well, I'm
probably
glad
would
you're
have done this anyways because I really wanted to talk about this with you
r-
today.
r- right. Yeah, I'm excited to have our first episode on the second book, Deadhouse Gates here. Um, we Me and the lady, we went and saw uh Halloween Ends last night, and God damn, worst fucking movie ever. It was terrible. I did no.
I've heard pretty mixed reviews on it.
I mean, like the deaths were cool, as always, but the story was just so unneeded. It was just so unneeded. It's kind of
Sorry,
like,
man.
yeah, it's kind of like our Reyest situation, which I feel a little bit different than I did last time about it, just based on some comments, the anticipation part of Reyes and everything surrounding him, and then he just goes down within a few chapters. That's kind of more or less this movie.
Huh.
Yeah, not really gonna spoil anything, but I'm sure you know where I'm headed with that.
A little bit, I think. Yeah, I
Okay.
think the last Halloween movie I saw was Age Too All. Um, yeah, I'd seen the original ones or some of them. I don't know if I've seen them all, but
I
yeah.
think that I've just seen the first one, and maybe the Rom Zombie ones. That's pretty much
Did
it.
Rob, did Rob Zombie do these remake ones?
He did a couple of them, and from what I understand, they're kind of like a prologue, or they're events that happened before the actual Halloween movies. I'm really uncertain of the timeline, but I
Huh,
could very well be wrong on that.
gotcha. Yeah, I don't watch a ton of like slasher type movies, but
Yeah, I'm not. That's not my shtick with horror. I'm not a big. The only real big slasher that I'm into is Freddy Krueger, and that's just because you can get a little bit more creative because of the whole dream thing. So
uh,
I,
yeah,
yeah,
I don't like those movies. They scared me as a kid, and I just yeah, like Chucky. I'm just not a movie I'm interested in watching.
that's fair. Although I think that the newer Chucky ones, you would probably get a kick out of because they're a little bit more modernized. So you may not have that association, being that we didn't really have technological dolls back then.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know, man. That fucking doll just creeps me out, though.
I mean, that's fair. Chucky gave me some scares when I was younger, but I mean, I've watched them now and they're pretty damn corny.
I bet I probably wouldn't really have a problem with it now, but it's kind of I feel like it's a principle type thing. Like I'm just sticking to my guns on it.
I mean, that's fair. I can understand where you're coming from. However, I think that it might be one of those things where you're like, wow, I suppressed this for that. Damn. you
Yeah,
know.
it very well could be.
To each their own. It's no worry, no pressure. They're not like amazing movies that you have to see by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah.
Maybe someday. We'll see.
So yeah, I guess should we kick off the prologue to Deadhouse Gates here?
Sure, we got a new book. We've got some new intro music that will I guess you'll have heard already because we're already talking on this episode. So that's always kind of exciting to switch things up a little bit, and then I guess you and I are switching things up here a little bit too, just as far as who's taking what section. So just kind of reverse things and keep things interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
If you're ready, I'll read our little epigraph here quick.
Do it.
What see you in the horizon's bruised smear that cannot be blotted out by your raised hand? From Talk the Younger.
Do you get the feeling that being that he's part of the epigraph in the second book that he's likely still alive to actually write these epigraphs.
I don't know. I feel like he's not gone.
Yeah. I think that that's definitely something that you and I can align on. I don't the way he went was just so fast, Like 1 second he was there and then the next he was gone. So I feel like he comes back in some way, shape, or form. But I
I
guess
hope
we'll just
so.
have to wait and find out, right?
That's all we can do. It's going to be disappointing if that was just it, though.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Oh well. Oh well. But yeah, let's get into this first section here from the prologue, which I will just say before I start, like this was goddamn, I was not expecting any of this, and it was absolutely just fucking beautiful. And we can kind of go more into it when we're done with the sections or even just the sections themselves. But the thirsting hour was coming to a close, and the priest came in its wake. Honoring his god, a servant of Hood, a misshapen mass of flies came shambling into Judgment's round. The brothers had been moved in procession out onto the streets of Unta to greet the god's sprites that mark the seasons of Rot's last day. The guards lining the round departed to let the priest of Hood pass, along with the flies in the priest's wake. The sky of Unta was still gray as flies flew at dawn into the capital of the Malazan Empire. Pestilence came with the season of rot, and the season had come 3 times within that last 10 years. The air of the round buzzed with flies, and somewhere there was a dog yelping, as if close to death. Near the fountain in the center of the round was a mule, still kicking, as flies climbed into every orifice. The priest walked by the mule, and the flies from the mule joined the shroud of flies passing by. It was clear to Felsen that the priest appeared to be walking straight to her. 1,000 eyes appeared to be staring at her. Felsen could barely remember the first season of Rot, but she could clearly recall the last one, nearly 3 years ago. With the last day of the season and its thirsting hour, Felizin had sat secure in her estate, with a mere irritation and revulsion and nothing more. Felizin is brought back to reality as the priest headed towards the cull's victims. Felizin wondered if the guards would intervene the priest's route, as it was likely that the priest running into her would be happenstance, but deep down she knew differently. A man squatting to her right had noticed that Felizin kept looking to the priest and then the guards and back to the priest. The squatted man tells her that he thinks not. Felizin asks the man what the priest of Hood wants with her. The squatted man makes some remarks about her nobility and her self-centeredness. He continues on and he tells Felizin that it is not her the priest seeks, but rather him. Felsen turns to face him and observes that this man is covered in markings and is naked but that of a loincloth. Felsen at this point realizes that this man is a priest of Fenner, the boar of summer. At this moment, Felsen observed in fascination the flies on this man were avoiding the tattoos and gathering at the stumps of where the man's hands used to be. The man was last in line, chained at his ankles. The priest of Hood had reached the man squatting on the ground. Felsen looked on in horror as she saw no flesh within the shroud of flies. The squatted man tells the priest of Hood that the thirsting hour is at an end, and that he should go back to his temple. The priest of Hood made no reply, however it seemed the buzzing around changed pitch. The squatted man seemed to have heard some type of reply, even though none was audible. He explains that he was, yes, once a priest of Fenner, but is no longer. And even though Fenner has no love for him, this ex-priest, he has less for this priest of Hood. Something shivered in her soul. As she heard the buzzing of flies forming words she could understand. The words were secret, to show, now. The ex-priest of Fenner tells Hood's priest to show him. At this moment, the flies burst outwardly. Perhaps it was Fenner himself swatting away the flies, but the rising tide of horror within her broke free. The former priest of Fenner flinched as if about to be hit. The others in line wriggled and pulled the chain taut. The guards approached and were able to get the line into submission. All the ex-priest of Fenner had to say was, "That was rude." Oh my god, just the very first paragraph of this damn section was just so beautiful. Like, you just imagine this, shroud of flies, and as this shroud is, imitating what would be a walk, flies are dropping to the ground and then exploding, to go different directions. Like, that was just, it was so beautiful, you know?
It was, yeah, it was something for sure. I know. I think I had read this before you did, and I text you and just said like, "Damn!" Like I've never read anything like this.
No, not at all. And I mean, the priest, this Hood's priest right here, it's just the level of brutality just within the first like two or three paragraphs. He's described as deaf, blind, mute, just a cloud of flies, really, and sunlight unable to touch anything within. The shroud of flies, and then also like appearing that there's no flesh underneath. Like, it's just like you can envision what this priest of Hood looks like.
Yeah, just uh, basically, you know, thousands and thousands of flies like choreographed, their movements. I don't know if that makes sense to you, I guess, but as they've all kind of choreographed themselves into a shape of a something humanoid, anyways, and I don't know. I guess I wasn't expecting at the end of this section when it that there actually wasn't a person underneath all these flies.
Right, because that's kind of how it makes it appear at the very beginning. And I mean, I can imagine myself in Felsen's shoes, just seeing this like monstrosity of what should be shaped like a man or a woman or somebody, a body, really, with just a bunch of flies swarming it around it so densely. And then, as I don't know if it's like a gesture of yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you would call all of the flies exploding into everybody's face. I mean, that sounds rude to me, but I'm not sure what this ex priest of Fenner really did in this moment. I don't know if we really have enough information to deduce what happened there, but it definitely, in a larger scale picture of things, definitely either Hood and Hood's acolytes don't agree with Fenner, is what I'm guessing. Like, there may be some history there.
There must be something. They're at maybe they're at odds with each other for whatever reason, but they don't seem to be the most cordial towards each other.
No, definitely not. And I mean, yeah, I mean he's an ex priest of Fenner. So it sounds like he no longer serves Fenner, but yet this Hood's priest of flies, so to speak, is, I guess, not. He's dispersing kind of what the Fenner priest asked him to do.
I kind of felt like that was probably going to happen anyways. That it was going to, I guess, reveal or whatever you want to call it was going to happen whether the priest said something or not. That's how I felt, anyways.
Yeah, and we'll get into it, but it was kind of during Felsen's like inner monologue here. She had mentioned that the season of rot had come 3 times within the last 10 years, sorry. And to me, this kind of sounds like it's more than normal. Did you get that feeling too?
Yes.
Okay. And the way that I'm getting the sense of, just based on everything in this prologue, is the season of rot and the thirsting hour are, I feel like it's kind of like an expunsion of those that are close to death. I don't, did you get that feeling too? Like, it's just kind of a rounding up those that are unable to shelter themselves, and they're just kind of like caught in the wake, kind of similar to what is the whole firstborn thing with the Bible. Not quite like that, but similar, as if you didn't have a house or you didn't have a way to secure yourself, you were at the mercy of the season of rot, right?
I guess I didn't think to that. Um, I don't know. I didn't really have, I guess, any deep thoughts on that.
I mean, that's fair. I just thought that it was interesting. I mean, as soon as this like Hood's priest was introduced, I kept thinking of reasons why he's there. Why is he there in the first place? You know, and think about it, right? Like he's a priest of Hood, so I'm assuming that he's kind of like Malazan's version of the Grim Reaper is maybe kind of how I'm interpreting this a little bit. I may be right, I may be wrong.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it just kind of sounds like based on Fellowsen, you know, going back to her recalling these other times that she witnessed the season of rot, and she sat secure in her estate and was irritated and you know had revulsion and nothing more towards it sounds like the season of rot based on their targets, so to speak, is something that the nobility just kind of get irritated about because they're privileged, they're wealthy, they have the means to ward off decay and disease, right? Whereas the poor doesn't. So I think that like the theme and the precedent that is already being established is definitely the nobility, right?
Yes, I agree. I definitely got the sense that yeah, the nobility thought this occurrence is just an annoyance to them.
Right. I think that it's an interesting juxtaposition that I feel like is beautifully laid out because here's Felsen not safe in her manor or her estate with any way of warding off these flies which are crawling all over her as well, and it's purely Lucine's responsibility, right? She's out in the season of rot, chained up along with other nobility as well as other people. So it definitely sounds like what Lucine was going to do in Jerujistan with culling the nobility came to fruition elsewhere.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like it would have been much fun.
No, it definitely doesn't. And this was another thing that I wasn't really expecting. I wasn't expecting, Gano's younger sister to be chained up, right? So it's an interesting switcheroo, so to speak, to the first time we met her was I think in the first chapter of Gardens of the Moon, and she was humbly secure in her estate, talking to her older brother, and then that's the last you hear of her. And then the prologue in this book, it's just like, God damn.
Yeah, I would not want to be any one of these people chained up.
Not at all.
Let alone, well, I guess they're probably all somebody of some renown. I mean, they, whether they're highborn or something else.
Right. I did you get the feeling that he was a bit more descriptive with people's descriptions than he was previously? That was something that I noticed.
Like as far as their looks,
Yeah,
with like the tattoos and stuff.
the tattoos, the stumps. I mean, this guy has clearly had his hands cut off. This Fenner priest, and he's got a bunch of like boar and what I imagined were like tribalish tattoos and patterns, all over his body. He's naked outside of like a little loincloth. But yeah, I just feel like just with the Hood's priest and the Fenner priest, I feel like he is a bit more descriptive with these characters than he was in Gardens of the Moon, and I think that's great. That was something that like I could understand and differentiate these characters in my mind, but I don't know. Now when I think of the Fenner priest, like he's naked and has a loincloth, whereas in Gardens of the Moon, some of those characters like all you really had. Like for example, Animander Rake, he's just basically a black guy with white hair, so but there's no description of clothes or like et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, even just within the first couple sentences of this book, you could tell that the writing was just a lot different right away. It just had a different feel compared
Right.
to Gardens of the Moon.
For lack of a better term, it was definitely more fleshed out. Ah.
Just like the priest,
Right, exactly.
he's got his
Uh,
flesh out.
his flies are showing.
Yeah, there you go. Nice one.
Or his fly is down. That was
I
bad.
like showing better.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't believe how amazing this opening to this book was. It was just such a surreal yet beautifully written section, and I wasn't expecting any of it, I mean, if this is already I mean, this is already setting the tone for the rest of the book, and like I honestly I cannot wait to start reading the actual first chapter to see where this takes us. So, or at least, starts for us.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited too. It's I know we've gotten some feedback from other people saying that we're in for a treat, so we'll have to savor it here, which I think we will.
I'm definitely savoring it. This is definitely a treat. It just I can't speak enough to just how visual this section was to me, I just kind of imagined this like sandy type environment, with walls all around them. And then there's just these chain of people, and there's this fucking monstrosity of flies approaching particular set of people. And yeah, it's just fucking awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Well, anything else you want to talk about here in the first
No,
section?
I feel like I should have more, but I mean, it's only just because I'm that impressed with this section that I feel like I should talk about it more. But I mean, the only thing that I can think of is the what do you think the flies meant when they said secret to show now?
I felt like it was just going to be them, taking off, and there's not actually a person there. After we got that reveal, I think that was just directly linked to that.
Oh, got it. Got it. Okay, so you think the secret to show now was them bursting out?
Yeah, and that there's nobody else there. Did you have a different thought?
No, I couldn't make any sense of that. I thought that was something alluding to some type of future something,
Oh,
that they
I
have to
didn't
look
feel
into.
that way. I guess I felt like it was just, it. We got those words, and then the payoff was immediate.
That's fair. I mean, that makes more sense because the way I had it in my mind, neither scenario really made any sense to me. But I mean, I guess I'm always thinking about like motivations, like what would motivate one, this fly creature, right, to basically kind of buzz in a different pitch words, which I thought was fucking awesome. Like I could hear that, you know, and it bursting out at the basically Felsen and the Fenner priest. But no, tying them together makes sense.
I feel like it's usually you who's got these things.
Well, I mean
You're
that's the beauty
usually,
of a podcast, right?
but you are very good at picking up on things.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not 100% with it too, and it's not like you're not good at it either.
I always enjoy listening to what you think.
Well, thank you. Likewise. It's That's the beauty of the show, right?
I think so. I think it's good.
Sweet. Yeah, I guess the deeper thoughts that I have were just with the season of rot and why it's here and the nobility compared to the poor, etc., etc.
Nobody wants the damn poor people around, so you may as well. Well,
Right.
but yeah, I don't know. This is a little different though, because it's the rich folk who are getting chewed up here.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely layers deeper than I think we're just kind of scratching the surface of the season of rot, so to speak. I really hope that, we kind of get some world building around that. Um just to kind of like maybe have it explained a little bit more cleverly, but that's just That's my interpretation based on the events of this book or this prologue.
I gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I didn't have anything else for this section. So if we want to move on to the next one, we totally can.
All right, I will take it away here. An hour had passed since the shock and horror of Hood's priest had settled into Fellison, just becoming one more thing in her never-ending nightmare. She wondered if that had been Hood himself, the Lord of Death, walking among the mortals. But why would he stand before a once priest of Fenner? What would be the point? As the questions faded from her mind, the cold feeling of despair returned. The Empress had called all the nobility, taken their wealth, and sentenced them to treason, which led to the nobility in chains. She looked at the priest on one side of her and what she assumed was a common criminal on the other. Clearly, neither were of noble blood. Felson laughed, and the men on either side of her were startled. The priest asked if Hood's secret had been revealed to her. She replied no. The priest asked what was so goddamn funny at a time like this. She did not answer vocally, but thought to herself that she would find herself in good company, and that was a pretty fucked up thought. That was the attitude the small folk were starving to tear down, and the same fuel the Empress threw on the fire. Just then she heard a woman call out, "Child!" It was an old woman's voice, and she recognized it as Lady Gayson. Lady Gayson continued to call out. She recognized her. The youngest daughter on House Paran. It was Fellison. Fellison's heart dropped, and she turned and looked the other way, thinking about how good life was only a week ago. Fellison came back to reality as Lady Gayson kept yelling. She wanted Fellison to talk to her, and appeal, because she had rich friends. The poor man next to Fellison answered and said her rich friends were further up the chain. The ex-priest told Lady Gayson it isn't worth looking for salvation from a woman who is only following orders, and from the woman who is also Fellison's sister. Fellison glared at the priest and said he presumed. She was interrupted by the thug and said he presumes nothing and says to forget that blood has anything to do with it. Maybe she thinks it's personal, and maybe she has to because of what she is. Fellison laughed again, asking what she was. Asking the thug what house claimed him. He replied the house of shame, and it makes no difference. Hers isn't looking any better. She looked at the guards and asked what was happening. Why were they sitting here? The ex-priest said that the thirsting hour was gone and the mob needed to be organized. They were going to be the first. The example must be set. What happens here will scare every noble-born shitless in the Empire. Lady Gayson says that's hooey, and they'll be treated just wonderfully. The thug grunted and said if stupidity was a crime, she should have been arrested years ago. The thug says not many will make it to the slave ships. It's going to be a bloodbath. The ex-priest again begins to talk about Fellison's sister, and she quickly shuts him down, saying she is no longer her sister. She is adjunct Tavor. She renounced her house in favor of the Empress. The ex-priest still thinks it's personal. She asks, what would he know about it? He said he was once a thief, then a priest, and now a historian. Fellison feels dumb for not recognizing him. He says his name is Heberick. Heberick Lighttouch. Fellison says that he wrote the revised history and committed treason. Heberick says it was all just a difference of opinion. Bowden, the thug, as we find out his name, said the Empress wasn't listening to it, though, especially when Heberick called her a murderer and said she messed up the job besides. Heberick figures that Tavor wants her sister to make it to the slave ships intact, especially since her brother disappearing on Genevacus took a toll on her father, or so he's heard. Heberick thinks it was rumors of treason that she ended up here, that Tavor just was trying to clear the family name. Fellison says that Heberick almost makes it sound reasonable even, but that she and Tavor had differing opinions, and this was the result. Heberick wanted to know what they didn't see eye to eye on, but Fellison gave no answer, and the line started to move. Fellison saw her sister, Adjunct Tavor, the heir to Lorne, who died in Darujistan, and with her was Tiamber. No one knew where she had come from, but she was now her personal assistant. Also, with the two of them were foreign soldiers with red swords. Heberick thought that was ironic. Bowden said they were called the Red Swords, and they were bloodless bastards. Heberick thinks Bowden is well traveled. Bowden says he's been on a ship or two, and rumor has it they've been in the city for a week or so. Looking at her sister, she wondered if losing her brother hurt her so badly. How badly did he fail that she had to go to this extreme, choosing between her and their mother for the symbolic sacrifice? But at least now her mother and father were together again. Bowden grunted again and said to keep their heads up. The endless hour was set to begin.
Jeez.
That was
What
pretty
a
long.
yeah.
Yeah, we found out quite a bit there. Sorry, I don't know why I had such a fucking hard time with that one part. I don't know. But yeah, this, I don't even know where to start with this. You know, you get Felson, who I kind of get the sense she knows that she's pretty well fucked. And then you get the complete opposite. You get this Lady Gayson who's just oblivious and thinks, oh, they're going to be treated fine and things are going to be good and, you know, they're probably going to get to eat and relax. And this lady, you're in fucking chains. Like, it ain't going to end well.
Right. Kind of like a little bit of denial with Lady Gacy in here.
Well, yeah. It's not denial. Yeah. Is there a stronger word than denial?
I think
Obliviousness? I don't know.
oblivious was pretty. I think a little bit better. Because yeah, she's definitely oblivious, but not oblivious in the sense where like she's not paying attention. Like I think that she's totally aware of her surroundings and the situation that she's in. But I think that I mean, she's an elder woman, right? My guess is that she's been nobility for a very long time and maybe have seen or heard similar situations to what she's in. But I think that her nobility and her privilege is clouding her mind as to what is actually happening here and the situation she's actually in, if that makes any damn sense.
Well, I don't know if they've seen anything like this because, well, Bowden or Heberick, one of the two, says that they're going to be the first. You know, they're going to be the example here for the rest of the world.
Right. No, I'm just saying that, she's got some experience to her. So, and, within the nobility, I would imagine that your resources are far more versatile than those that are living in the streets, so to speak. So it's very likely that in other in other cities or in other continents, so to speak, she may have heard rumors or stories about potentially similar situations with the nobility. Because from what I not understand, I'd like mix Lucine and understand together. That was weird. But from what I understand, the previous emperor didn't have any love for the nobility either. So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
All right. I don't see any problem with it.
But yeah, I mean, it's a section of like alternating opinions and observations, right? And theories and speculation and you know, I even found myself confused as to like, well, who do I really align with here? My gut is either Felazin or Heberick, right? Like, it makes sense what Heberick is saying about Tavor and Felzin. I think that he's trying to make or come from the perspective that she's just trying to clear her name, and there's no, but yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but
I have a theory, and we can talk about that once we get through the rest of the sections. I told you, a little bit when we were texting back and forth that I kind of had this theory, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I've started to listen to our show, which, I mean, I know you hear it when you're editing it, but once we're done recording, I haven't gone back and listened to them up until recently. And I'm just about done with episode 5. And it's going to be a moonshot here, but we'll talk about it later.
hey, I like how you're bringing that back in.
This theory that I have that relates. It makes sense in my head, and I mean, I don't know. We'll see. That's why it's fun to make these theories, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it too. So I've been sitting in anticipation for this theory.
we'll get there, all in due time.
Right.
A couple thoughts that I had on this. Uh, where Bowden says, it's to forget about that blood has anything to do with it. You know, that it's personal, maybe because of what she is. I assume he's saying it's because you're highborn. Was that what your thought?
Oh, when Bowden, the thug.
Yeah,
I think it's either because she's nobility and thus has been clumped in with the other nobility in this chain, but I also see that it could be because it is because she is Tavor's sister.
I think that makes sense too. But I guess they seem like they're kind of tied
Right.
together to
Yeah.
me because I don't think like the adjunct is probably not going to be just a common born person, right?
Right.
It's probably going to be somebody that's highborn or nobility or whatever. And so I think in that case, yeah, that their sisters does make sense.
I think it's a being that Tavor is from House Paran, but Felsen is also from House Paran. But I guess my question is like, did Lucine reach out to Tavor because of Ganoz? And then as a way to punish Ganoz, being that one, the older sister, even though from what I understand, Tavor is still younger than Paran or from Ganoz, uh, is one punishment, right? Because now she's pretty much on the opposite side of Ganoz, or what Empress Lucine is maybe speculating. And two, his younger sister, Felsen, being that she is nobility, gets automatically coupled and grouped with the nobility and the culling. So that's also like a second blow to the face, so to speak. I think that's kind of where the motivation is coming from, if that makes any lick of a sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say right now.
But
I
yeah,
think you're kind of you're catching on to what I'm thinking, and I think if you re-listen to our episode on chapter 4, uh, I like because it just hit me. I'm like, oh, okay. I think this is what could happen.
oh,
But
okay. Maybe I'll have to go back and listen to it. I mean, yeah, it's been a minute.
yeah, it has. But well, I'll tell you about it. So we'll get there though.
Okay.
One of the other things that I found interesting, we find out Heberick, he was this historian and he committed treason for writing this book, on the revised history. So it's funny, whoever wins the war, they're the one that gets to write the history, right? So did Heberick? Did he, maybe paint things in a different light? Maybe more reflective of what actually happened versus what they're saying did happen. Um, I don't know. If they said, oh, the Empire, put an end to this uprising. Did Heberick say no? It was just a slaughter of these innocent people. There was no uprising. Something kind of like that. Um, obviously the Empire is not going to like that, and so they're going to say he committed treason. I don't know if that makes any sense to you at all.
No, I mean, feel like it makes perfect sense. And when I was reading this section, I feel like it almost kind of is a parallel to things that are going on today. And even just, I guess I can't relate or speak for you, but when I was going through high school, I mean, all of the things that I know about, enslavement and the Civil War is definitely a bit more twisted to be on the positive side of things. When in actuality that's not really the case. So I think that this is the reason why Heberick is here, is because he's going against the grain of indoctrination from the Empire, and
I
that's why
think
he
so.
finds himself chained up with the nobility.
Yeah, he's definitely, yeah, probably not best friends with higher ups. I'm gonna guess.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The only one that I really can't, I mean, Bowden, the thug, I would assume it's just because of maybe what he does. Um, and that's why he's chained up here. I guess thinking it from Empress Lucine's perspective, anybody who is quote unquote like unwanted, is essentially going to partake in the thirsting hour, or what was the other thing that they called it? Um,
The the endless,
the endless hour.
or was it endless night? Endless hour.
Uh,
No, you're right.
yeah, endless
Thirsting
hour.
hour, endless hour.
Yep. So, it almost kind of seems like, and now that I'm thinking about it, that the season of rot, which I'm assuming encompasses the thirsting hour and the endless hour, are it some type of celebration. Do you get that feeling too? That it's like the season of rot is some type of festival that is just kind of like a extermination of undesirables. I almost feel like the season of rot is like encompasses the thirsting hour and the endless hour. And to me, I'm getting structure. Like there's names for these things, right? So is this type of is this some type of routine that happens every so often to more or less get rid of undesirables, or maybe some type of sacrifice for hood? I mean, it just seems like there's some type of organization to it, really, which is making me suspect that this is a normal thing for those that don't have to endure it.
Well, something must set it up. I want to say it almost seems like a changing of the season to me in some sense, but it doesn't seem like there's a set time frame. Like we know when like summer and winter and fall come, and we might experience some of those weather effects at varying times before or after, but um, this seems quite a bit more random. You've had it 3 times in 10 years, but there must be something that marks this as happening, as an event. I don't really know how to put it into better words beyond that, I guess.
Yeah, it just kind of seems like, you know, those who have control and power, i.e., the Empress or emperors or whatever. It seems like they've taken they've taken this like natural occurring thing and like made it a thing, if that makes any damn sense. You know,
Yeah.
because like the season of rot shouldn't have anything to do with gathering up undesirables and you know the events that happen after.
Yeah, like I mean, like that could really just happen at any time you wanted, really.
Right. So maybe that's just a way of showing the reader that things, revolts, riots, things happening. Because from what I understand, Empress Lucine has been an empress for 9 years now, right? So that would mean that season of rot has come more frequently in her reign than it did previously, is what I'm going to assume. Which
It definitely seems that way.
which then kind of plays into, well, a lot of people are probably not, they're probably still pissed off at Lucine, right? So there's still kind of like some of those overarching themes in Gardens of the Moon, with resentment and not really willing to accept the emperor's death and follow a new ruler, so to speak, is still kind of continuing. And I think that what's happening is Lucine is trying to control it, and the season of rot, kind of going back to what I was saying, is some type of show that she can essentially create. I mean, she does have powerful mages, I would assume, at her side, that do have the ability to either make a deal with Hood or his priests and get rid of people that they don't want around.
You could see something like that happening.
But yeah, I thought this section was a great way to chime in, the different levels of perspective. And fellas, and I feel terrible for her. I can empathize with what is going through her mind, and these other characters and their different perspectives on what is happening. There's definitely some acceptance. There's definitely some obliviousness. and there's a lot of fear. And I think that it was just captivated so well, you know.
Yeah, I don't know how you wouldn't be. I mean, if you're shackled up, you probably should be in fear.
Right, right, absolutely. Um, yeah, I guess I don't know if I have really anything else to add. I still feel like we could talk about these two sections for hours, but I don't want to edit a 4-hour video.
I just had one thing. Maybe you can clear this up, but we find out, and I don't remember if it was Bowden or Hedrick, but one of them called the other an ogre. Um, you know, did you get the sense that one of them really is an ogre, or one of them is just a really like fucking big dude?
Oh, I didn't see it that way. I saw it as like a name call, like a
Okay,
calling of names, like don't be such an ogre, is what
I wasn't real sure on that.
I guess now I'm not either, because I mean you bring up a point. I mean when I think of Howden, I or Bowden, sorry, excuse me, combining the two again. Um, I I imagine him as tall and lanky and almost gaunt. So maybe that's where that's coming from. But yeah, I thought it was just a name call. I thought initially.
I think I'm probably leaning that way too, just because Fellison describes, as just men on either side of her.
Yeah,
This is just something I wasn't 100% sure on, and figured I'd pick your brain.
that's fair.
So if you're ready to take on your last section here, take it away.
All right. Hebrick winced as he was shuffled forward. It was one thing to accuse the Empress of murder, but only if they had heeded his warning, as he had predicted this move. Hebrick had written about wealth and its effect on the poor, and could admit a bitter admiration for the Empress and her adjunct Tavor. The excessive brutality of nobles' doors battered down, dragged from their beds, sleep deprived and shackled up, forced to stand before a drunken jury of beggars dragged in from the streets. It was the first layer of shock. This makes Hebrick think about Tavor and her knowing the nobility's weaknesses, and was ruthless in exploiting them. He wonders what would drive someone to do this. The poor folk had mobbed the streets when they had heard the details, praising Empress Lucine for her actions: riots, looting, slaughter, and hunting down nobles within the noble district that had attempted to get away. The Empress made few mistakes, and she'd used the opportunity to gather up miscontents, academics who didn't align, too close to close the fist of military presence on the capital. The need for more troops, more recruits, more protection from the scheming of the noble class. The seized assets of the nobility paid for the expansion. Even if forewarned, the cruel rage now swept through each of the cities. Hebrick looked along the chain at the people in the line. He noticed the shock that painted their faces, and how disheveled everybody looked. Exactly what the angry mob lusted to see and hungered to flail. Welcome to the streets, he thought to himself. As the guard prodded the line into motion, he watched Adjunct Tavor sitting tall on her horse. Studying her features, he thought to himself about how she wasn't born with much. He observed Tavor's gaze go to that of her sister, the woman right in front of him. Hoping for some type of wry smirk or pleasure of satisfaction, nothing but brief recognition was all to be had as her gaze kept moving along the line. The guards opened the east gate about 200 feet in front of him. A roar poured through the ancient archway. Startled pigeons began flapping their wings as they took flight. To Huberic, the sound of flapping wings was that of the gods clapping. And, not to be denied a gesture, he makes a slight bow. Heberic thinks to himself that Hood keeps his secrets, and tells Fenner to look on now to see what becomes of his wayward son. So I think that at the beginning of the section, it's really kind of like affirming maybe some of the motivations from Adjunct Tavor, and she is using her knowledge of the nobility to be able to basically, exploit them to the streets and to put them in shackles, and just the level of brutality that I can imagine went into it is like really fucked up. So to me, it doesn't seem like Tavor is doing anything but her job. I don't. It doesn't seem like she really has any emotions at this point. Like I feel like she's just kind of numb to it because I don't know if it's really set into her what's happened.
Reading this section, and I I hope that this doesn't come across as like offensive or anything. I know we have, I I think we have at least one German listener, but I got a lot of like, at least from our U.S. history classes, this felt very much like the Jews being rounded up in World War II, right? Like forced out of their homes, yeah, just all of that type of thing. Um, and you've got, Lacine, kind of running the show. It really gives me shades of that type of I don't know the word, like a roundup, I guess,
Yeah.
collecting all of these people, on a smaller scale, but you're trying to win these people over to your side, so you're showing them how you're blaming all these problems on, these people who aren't to blame.
Right, the nobility.
And
Yeah.
I don't have good enough words to explain it, but that was just really really how it's kind of seemed to me. And that's kind of a scary thing, because you can see it doesn't necessarily take a lot. I mean, and you can look at our own country to that too. Now, in the last 4 years, the things that the extremes that people will go to with that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where that door goes.
Yeah. And I think that from what I understand about German culture is that they recognized what happened in the past and they teach it like it actually happened, as brutal and as sad as it is to teach. It's not something that they want to ever happen again. So I think that I don't think that that was offensive in any way, shape, or the form because they acknowledge the past and they learned from it, unlike some other countries.
Right. Those were kind of my thoughts on all of this. I mean, I'm sure you've definitely got stuff, and I'd love to hear more of your thoughts. But maybe I'll feed off whatever you talked about. But I don't think I really had anything else in addition to add right now.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. I think that so far, and again, with the little information that we have, Heboric here, it seems like a very wise and insightful person. It sounds like he saw this coming, and he attempted to make his warnings known, but seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. And my guess is the nobility is the one that he warned about. But at the same time, he says that he has a bitter admiration for the Empress and her and Adject Tavor, essentially. I find this interesting for this character because we know that he is shackled up with the nobles, and the two-sided coin in this, another coin, is that he doesn't appear or seem to be grouped with the nobles, but finds himself alongside them. So while he doesn't particularly have remorse for the nobility, what's been done to them, thus his bitter admiration, he is still grouped with the nobility, even though he is not noble born. So he warned the noble. He, from what I understand, or what I'm assuming, he warned the nobles, but yet he still ends up finding himself chained with him because of the literature and the histories that he quote unquote wrote. Whether that was, um, an opinion, which he does say in the previous section, it was a differentiating of opinion. So my guess is that that's just his fancy way of saying he told how it happened, and thus he finds himself in this predicament. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. Simple as that.
but I really liked how we get brief details on the events that transpired here in Unta. It seems like the play was to allow the poor to get quote unquote revenge on the nobility and get the poor essentially on the Empress's side. So strategically, and I hate to say it, it's kind of a smart play, right? And not only does Lysine commandeer assets from the nobility to fund her expansion and her military, but she now has the support of those who have hated or resented the nobility. And it sounds like she's doing this with other cities as well. So how else do you get people out of the way, right? Take their common enemy that essentially they coexist with each other and make an example out of the nobility and get the support and followers that she's so desperately needs to control, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you see that Lysine's kind of showing these common folk that they do have a power that they probably didn't know they had. That they can overthrow these nobles just based on sheer numbers and not really anything else. They can just overwhelm them.
Right. Yeah, like they're given control.
But I think it's kind of like a false sense of control because ultimately Lysine's going to have that control.
Right. Yeah, exactly. She's 100% in control of it all.
She's just kind of manipulating these people.
Right. I mean, I would assume, I mean, from what we understand from, Gardens of the Moon, is that she attempted to take over the last free city, which was Jerusalem. Based on the events of Gardens of the Moon, I don't think that she was successful. So what else do you do? You know what I mean? Well, what else do you do? You gotta gain control where you have it, and it kind of sounds like from the end of Gardens of the Moon, the Seven Cities has regained control from Lysine, or on its way to that point. So it kind of seems like she was losing control, and now she's going to the extreme opposite and doing something about it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But when the guards open the east gate, and again, I nowhere near did it justice, but the roar that poured out through the archway was so beautifully described. Like I can hear it in my head. What I imagine basically a rushing mob of beggars and people living on the streets, so to speak. And I thought it was interesting that because of this, pigeons were essentially startled, and the flapping of wings to Huberic sounded like the gods clapping. So when the gods were clapping, he makes a slight bow. And I found this really interesting, and I feel like there is something with this. It said that he appreciated the ironic touch of the gods. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, Huberic think that he's getting an applause from the gods, so he bows as a gesture of respect. I guess I'm not really unsure or understand why the gods would be clapping in a moment like this, unless they're sadistic as fuck. But maybe that's the point. I just I thought that was a really weird thing to say, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it.
Well, I mean, you might have a really good point there. I mean, there's an old saying, something along the lines that God is just a kid with a magnifying glass, right?
Right. So yeah. I feel like there's something there, but I don't know if it's.
Do you think? Go ahead.
Oh
Sorry.
no, I really didn't know where I was going with that. I didn't have a nice way to tie it up.
I was going to ask you if you think if Heberick, if he continues on in this book, do you think he'll be our new like Krupp figure in some sense?
No, I don't really. I'm not really getting Krupp vibes from Huberic. I'm getting more. Not that Krupp wasn't wise by any means, but he was like over the top, so to speak. But Huberic seems to be a little bit more down to earth and kind of more realistic, more logical, whereas Krupp is more kind of um, outgoing, extensuate. Yeah,
I feel like I see some similarities there, and yeah, they're not copies of each other by any means, but
yeah. But I mean, I could definitely tell where you're going with that. Uh, there definitely are some similarities, but yeah, I mean, outside of that, I don't really have anything else to add to that. I thought it was cool that we we get some understanding as to Lucine's going about it, and I think that Tavor, which again was another unexpected thing. I really didn't think that Tavor would be taking over Lauren's spot as adjunct, because I know Lauren had the ability to more or less sense when magery or magic took place. I mean, I guess we just don't know enough about Tavor, but is and that's kind of what makes me think like, is Lucine just settling to make a point by picking Tavor as adjunct? Like, is there really any is are there special skills that she has that would be, I guess, executable to Lucine's commands? Especially we know that there's going to be mages involved. Like, is she a swordsmith? Does she have combat skills? I mean, that's not anything that we get revealed in Gardens, but I would assume there has to be something there.
Yeah, we don't know yet, but that doesn't mean we won't find out.
No, not at all. But yeah, I guess you wanna take it away and wrap up this prologue here.
Felsen was somehow able to keep her sanity in the face of chaos. Soldiers lined Colonnade Avenue in ranks 3 deep, but somehow the mob still managed to find weak spots to get through. She was still she was able to somehow watch despite being hit, punched, and spit on. Felsen still managed to hold steady on her sanity, while arms without hands held her and pushed her forward. Nobody touched the priest. Ahead of them was Bauden, and he was more terrifying than the mob. He killed with indiscretion, throwing bodies aside after ripping them apart. The soldiers held their weapons tighter as he was near. Bauden was laughing, bloody and beaten, but anything that was within reach he grabbed and killed. The only time he stopped was when the line stopped or Lady Gayson faltered, and he would have to pick her up and push her onward. The death march through the city continued. Hearing everything was in a haze, sights and sounds she would never forget. They had the gates within sight, but that's when the biggest break in the line occurred. Soldiers fading, an endless tide of ferociousness. Heberick was able to grunt out that this was the one. Bauden was still in full berserker mode. Felsen's last garb of clothing was ripped away, and another hand yanked her hair. She heard screaming, realizing it was her own voice, and then heard more. A circle pit opened around Bauden that the heaviest heavy metal band would die to see. At Bauden's feet lay Lady Gayson. Bauden was savagely beaten, missing an ear, part of his skull exposed. Time seemed to slow down. Bauden said he was no nobleman. What did they want from him? A noble woman's blood? The mob screamed, reaching out eagerly. As Bauden laughed, he said that they would pass. He pulled up Lady Gayson. Felsen couldn't tell if she was alive at this point or not, but she looked almost at peace. With his other hand, Bauden roared to the crowd that she was theirs as he snapped her neck like a twig. He wrapped the chain around her head and began to use it as a saw. Felsen had no words. Heberick could only mutter for Fenner to have mercy. Even the crowd quieted, their bloodlust satiated, at least for the time being. Everything came to a stop, except Bauden using the chain to cut off Lady Gayson's head. Anything else happening nearby may as well have been on another planet. Her head removed in a mockery of life, Bauden yelled to the crowd that they had a deal and flung it into the crowd. Wherever it happened to land, screams marked the spot. More soldiers and red swords appeared. Here, at least, peace was restored peacefully, but everywhere else people were killed by swords. Anyone who could flee did. When this had all started, there were around 300 prisoners on the line. Now, Felsen could see less than 100. Some chain links only contained body parts, hands, or arms. Heberick said it was wasted, though. The soldiers were nearby, and she could have lived. Bauden said she would have only died in the holds anyways. Bauden bared his teeth and said he hated making deals with bastards. Felsen told him not to make any more deals. The survivors were pushed out of the east gate towards the town of Luckless, where the slave ships were. Farmers and peasants lined the road towards the ships, but these people were no mob like those in the city. But she could see the bleakness in their eyes. She didn't know where it came from, but she did understand that's why she was different from them, and knew that in her sustained wounds, her lessons had only begun.
Man, such a fucked up section. Ugh.
Damn. That like you were saying, you could hear your section. I felt absolutely the same about this. I mean, I could see it. It's almost written like you could, like I was there. Really, like
Right.
that's how I felt. And again, as we say, we've said many times in the past, and probably will continue to say, we did our summaries don't do justice to the words actually written by Stephen Erickson.
No, not at all. It just the the crowd, the mob, the screaming, the tearing of flesh, the spitting, the hair pulling. It was visceral. It was just so visceral and
That's the
unreal.
word I would use too. Yeah.
I mean, and you're 100% right. Like you read this section and you're like, damn, you really almost feel like you're in the line. You're also screamed or, shackled up with everybody else and, you know, to lose 66% or more of what you originally started with, like, damn, this mob definitely got the better of the undesirables, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the moment that really where things really set in for me was just everybody just went quiet. Like that one, like kind of gave me chills. Like you get can like, and this isn't even a good comparison, but like you know, you and I like the same type of music. We go to a concert and it's just insanity, right?
Right.
But could you imagine just like in the middle of a song, like if everybody just stopped, there was, nobody was pushing, no mosh pitting, nothing, no screaming, no singing along, and you just stood there and watched. Like, again, like not a good comparison, but that's the only thing I could really draw to.
I mean, it's an eerie feeling. Absolutely. I totally get what you're trying to personify here. But I mean, like, what I would add to your personification is that if everybody in the heavy metal show just stopped to watch this dude saw off a head using not a saw, like, you got to be going super berserker to get that head off with a dull chain. Like there's no sharp points on a rounded piece of metal linked together. Like fuck. That is some savagery.
Yeah, that's pretty dark, that's for sure.
So I mean I feel like comparatively, I mean, and again we've wrapped up one book, but I feel like the savagery and the visceralness just within this prologue alone outbeats all of Gardens of the Moon. Maybe that's
Oh
a
yeah,
tall order, but
but I mean, it doesn't even feel like it was close.
no, not at all. Yeah, it just the writing was just absolutely beautiful. Like you could see it, you could hear it, probably even smell it. I remember I probably like I always do. I read the prologue maybe two or three times, and each time I would find something that just wow, just took me aback so much.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I read this one twice too, and it was, I mean, just as good the second time as it
Hmm.
was the first.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like there's just messed up action in the section to kind of cap it off, but I feel like the real takeaway is what happened at the end of the section, wouldn't you say?
You broke up a little bit there. You want to run that by me again?
Oh, I feel like while the majority of the section was pretty action packed, I feel like the takeaway is at the end of the section, wouldn't you say?
For Fellison,
Yeah.
that things are just kind of getting started for her. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, as bad as she's, this is a pretty bad thing that she's seen, but we already get the sense that she's seen things that are worse or just as bad, and it's continuing. But now things are gonna take some sort of a turn for her here.
Yeah, I think it's
Good or bad, I don't know yet.
right. Yeah, I think it is further kind of capping on, the juxtaposition between her life of nobility and I'm sure that like, she's no stranger to these types of happenings, but now that she's actually in the situation, it was giving her a little bit of a different perspective now. And I think that this is what is happening by when she thinks that her lessons have only begun, is because now she understands what people on the streets are going to do, which I feel like if for whatever reason she ever gets out of enslavement or doesn't even make it to those slave ships and somehow escapes in some way, shape, or form, I think that like she's definitely going to hold this lesson to heart, and instead of going with the grain of the nobility, she's going to try to bridge nobility and uh, I guess beggars and poorer folks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Are you ready for my theory?
Let's hear your theory.
Okay, so this is it's like I said, it's gonna be a long shot, I think. But so you remember in Gardens of the Moon where Paran gets stabbed and he's at Hood's gate,
Yeah,
and Open are there, and um, he's kind of having like this out of body experience, and they said that they're bargaining for his soul, and so they decide to send him back to, I guess, the land of the living, or however you want to say it, his plane of existence. But they're gonna take somebody else that's close to him.
yeah,
They're gonna kill somebody close to him, basically in his place.
yeah.
I think I think it's gonna be Fellison, and I think this because to a oldest son, and we know both his parents are dead now. You have basically an estranged sister in Tavor, and then all you have left is your baby sister. Well, even if you had the rest of your family, like a big brother's always going to be watching out for his little sister, right?
Right.
So I think that's just going to be, I don't want to say like the joke, but the price that he's going to have to pay. And I think somehow, maybe it's not going to happen in this book, but maybe down the line, where Fellison's going to die or get killed. And we're probably, I feel like it's going to be at Tavor's hands, and we're going to have a showdown between Ganos and Tavor. That is my theory, my long shot theory here, just off the prologue and basically from re-listening to our previous episodes. If I didn't re-listen to that previous episode, I would not have come up with that.
Huh.
But that is kind of where I think things could go, and I could see. I mean, it would cause a lot of pain for Ganos,
Uh,
and it's like something like a narrative that he's going to have to overcome that pain. And the other line that kind of drew that to me was where it talked about clearing the family's name. So I think Ganos is going to have to take out Tavor to clear the family name.
I like this theory. I'm going to agree with you, but I'm also going to add something to it, right? So, if
Okay.
you recall, Ganos didn't get the satisfaction of killing Lorne, right?
Right.
But how fucked up is it?
No, he did not.
Right, but how fucked up is it that if your theory is correct, the adjunct he takes out is his own sister?
Yeah. I think that's part of my thoughts on it is he's going to have to, revenge get revenge for his sister by killing his other sister, or
Right.
trying to.
Yeah, that's fucked. That's fucking messed up. That's fucking messed up.
So we'll see. Like I said, I don't know if it'll play out in this book or maybe later on in the series, but that's just from what we've already gone through and just a few pieces here. It makes sense in my head
Yeah,
that things maybe they go that way,
maybe you're right.
and maybe it goes a completely different direction. But right now, that is my theory for the beginning of this book.
Right. Yeah, no, I like that. That's great. That was deep. I loved it. Great work, dude.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Wow. We did it. We did the prologue of the second book here.
Yeah, dude, it feels really good to like. I've got a big sense of accomplishment for us. We got through like one whole book, which like yeah, we could have just read the book, but like we did it one chapter at a time. We stuck to it. We're starting the second book. What is this? Our 27th episode overall.
Well, 28th technically, because we still have a side
28th.
quest episode that we haven't released yet, but should be coming out in the next week or two. I suppose by the time that this is posted, that will have been out for a week. So excuse that. But yeah, no, Gardens of the Moon, everything is uploaded from the first chapter or from the prologue to the epilogue. So yeah, check that out. If you are just joining us and seeing the podcast about Deadhouse Gates here, know that we do have every chapter from Gardens of the Moon to check out as well.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I've been re-listening to it. I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. Maybe it was just a little hesitation, just listening to myself talk. But it is fun re-listening to our episodes because I mean I kind of remember most of the stuff, but then I hear things and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. I didn't remember that, or I did, and it was just fun.
Right. Yeah, it's a nice way to go back, and if you're, reading the book currently, or if you've read the series already and maybe doing a reread, or read the series and you just kind of want like a way to check in without really reading the books. I mean, I see no way better way to do it than listening to a podcast that breaks it down chapter by chapter. So
Yeah, 100% right.
I know that there are other podcasts out there, and I don't think that from what I understand, they go sub book by sub book. But I feel like there's enough content in each chapter to warrant an episode, which I think is great.
Yeah. So next week we will start the first subbook of Deadhouse Gates, which is Raraku.
Raraku.
So we'll see what that brings. I don't know. It looks like our first chapter is 24-ish pages long or somewhere around there. So we'll see what we have to cover.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing that and I know we talked about this prior to hitting the record button, but would you speculate that the prologue in Deadhouse Gates here is happening shortly after the events of Gardens of the Moon? Or would you say that they're kind of
Uh,
happening in tandem?
I guess I'm not sure because just going off the years, we know that the prologue for Deadhouse Gates takes place 9 years after the prologue in Gardens of the Moon and 2 years after the first chapter. So I think they're probably somewhere close, but I guess I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that they're either shortly thereafter, or they're kind of as the events of Gardens of the Moon are wrapping up. Lucien is starting this venture in Unta. So I mean, it hits pretty home for Ganoes in so many more ways than one. So it'll be curious.
Yeah,
I'm curious as to see where everything unfolds here. Yeah, I guess
we'll have a little bit more of a clear picture next week then.
hopefully. Uh, and yeah, it's hard to know what to expect after this. So, yeah, I guess outside of that, it was a great episode. As always, it was great to talk to you, and I guess we'll see y'all next week.
We'll see y'all next week and enjoy the new music here. A little bit, not really a different format, but just flip things around a little bit between Justin and I. And yeah, find us on Twitter and YouTube.
Sweet. I'll see you later, dude.
Take it easy, man.
Bye.